delivered 1851 at the Women's Convention in Akron, Ohio. Well, children, where is this so much racket? There must be something out of kilter. I think that twice the Negroes of the South and the women at the North all talking about rights. The white man will be in a fix pretty soon. But what's all this here talking about? The man says that women need to be helped into carriages and lifted over ditches and to have the best place everywhere. Nobody's ever helped me into carriages or over mud puddles or gives me any best place. And ain't I a woman? Look at me. Look at my arm. I have plunged and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could hear me. And ain't I a woman? I could work as much and eat as much as a man when I could get it, and bear the lash as well. And ain't I a woman? I have borne 13 children and seen most sold off to slavery. And when I cried out with my mother's grief, none but Jesus could hear me. And ain't I a woman? Then they talk about this thing in the head. What's that they call it? Intellect. That's it, honey. What's that got to do with a woman's rights or Negro's rights? If my cup won't hold but a pint and yours holds a quart, wouldn't that be mean not to let me have my little half measure full? Then that little man in the black there, he says women can't have as much rights as men, 'cause Christ wasn't a woman. Where did your Christ come from? Where did your Christ come from? From God and a woman. Man had nothing to do with him. If the first woman God ever made was strong enough to turn the world upside down alone, these women together ought to be able to turn it back up and get it right side up again. And now they asking to do it. The men better let them. Obliged to you for hearing me. And now old Sojourner ain't got nothing more to say. That was a speech that Sojourner wrote. Sojourner Truth. Born Isabel, also known as Isabel Van Wagner. American orator, lecturer, and activist. A complex and popular figure during the African American Emancipation Movement and an advocate of women's rights in her lifetime. Sojourner Truth was a significant historical figure and a symbol for equality, and a literate former slave who rose to great acclaim. Truth carved a powerful persona for herself as a woman's suffragist and a black rights crusader. In addition to an autobiography that she narrated to Olive Gilbert, published in 1850, Truth is best remembered for her public speeches, the most famous of which was delivered at a Women's Rights Convention Center in Akron, Ohio in 1851. Transcribed by complimentary author Frances Dana Gage. Truth challenges to the assembly, "Ain't I a woman?" Immortalizes her speech that demanded equal rights for women, black and white, who comprised the early suffrage movements in America. In a predominantly Dutch and French farming community in New York State, the daughter of James Bonfrey and Elizabeth was born into slavery sometime around 1797. Named only Isabel, her first language was Dutch. It is believed that Isabel's limited formal education came to her from her mother, who taught her to say a few standard Christian prayers. It is also believed that from her parents she learned of her family's slave history and the great losses suffered by the separation of African American families who were broken up and sold off by their owners. The slave trade in the North sold thousands of African Americans, New Yorkers, into perpetual bondage in the South. The slave trade in the North sold thousands of African Americans, New Yorkers, in the South. Although it was not illegal for Northern slaves to obtain an education, schools in New York were well beyond Isabel's reach at the farm where she grew up, and she never learned to read or write. In 1814, after being separated from her parents, she married Thomas, a fellow slave in the house of John J. Dumont. Little is known about this relationship, but she did have 5 children between 1815 and 1826. Isabel left her husband soon after she became free. She says little more about him. In 1827, prior to the Emancipation Act in 1828, they freed all slaves in New York State. Isabel heard that her master planned to go back on his promise to grant her freedom. She found refuge with the Van Wagners, a Quaker family, whose submarine she took as her own. She remained with the Van Wagners, working as a domestic servant until 1829, when she moved to New York City. There she joined a local Methodist church and became increasingly involved in spiritual development. She remained in the city until 1843, when she left to become a Wagner evangelist. In June of 1843, when Isabel decided to become full-time traveling preacher, she also formally changed her name to Sojourner Truth to reflect what she believed was her destiny, to wander the earth spreading spiritual truth. Although she never learned how to read or write, Truth was known and respected for her intellectual wisdom. A keen observer early in the life, Truth learned to read people, an ability she used to survive in often hostile world. Working as a domestic in New York households from the late 1820s through the early 1840s and attending church meetings and spiritual gatherings, Truth acquired the skills she would need as a public speaker and preacher. During these years, she spoke regularly at camp meetings around New York City, and by the time she went on the road as a preacher in 1843, she was practiced public speaker. Though her travels made her the way, Massachusetts was where she came in contact with Northampton Associates, a group of reformers, abolish, and women's rights advocates. This association led Truth to embrace principles and abolitions and equal rights, and she reforced her lectures to reflect these newfound beliefs. Her powerful style and honest message eventually built her a formidable reputation on the anti-slavery feminist lecture circuit. Truth narrative is strictly spiritual work and focuses mainly on the evolution of faith and her religion experiences. Addition, because it ends not with slave owners but prayers for forgiveness for their mistakes. It also remained outside the canon ex-slave narratives. In her lifetime, Truth was known prominently as a speaker and lecturer, and she is most remembered for her commentary rather than her deeds. An obvious obstacle in elevating her work was the fact that she learned to read and write. Therefore, scholars had to depend on other observers for records of her speeches. Although Truth lectured over 40 years, only four textual accounts of her speeches are existed. The Akron, Ohio address in 1851. Truth also served as the inspirer Harriet Beecher Stowe's story. I wanted to do Sojourner Truth because by being a black woman, it gives me more to look at of what she had to go through to make black people who they are today. This woman was sold. Her parents died. She had no one. She was beat by her master. And she just had no one to turn to. All of her children were gone. And she was just alone all her life. She didn't have her brothers and sisters to be there with her, to comfort her. And she was just alone. And I just feel so bad for her. Like, it's so sad to read because it's like, to grow up with no one, that had to be hard. Like, you can't express yourself to anyone because no one is listening. Like, you work for white people, so they want you to work. They don't care about how she felt at all. So when she got free, she decided to do something that she really believed in her whole life. And that's why I just picked to talk about Sojourner Truth. Thank you.